So again, I'm Jessie Whittish with Kentucky Youth Advocates. What we're going to talk about today, a few things. First, the Children's Advocacy Day at the Capitol agenda. It is the 15th annual Children's Advocacy Day at the Capitol, which is pretty incredible. So thank you to all of you who are on this webinar who have been to Children's Advocacy Day in the past, and all of you who are braving that for the first time. Some other stuff we're going to talk about today is the advocacy checklist for before Children's Advocacy Day, during Children's Advocacy Day, and after Children's Advocacy Day. We are also going to do a brief overview of the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children policy priorities, the legislative priorities. So we're going to talk a little bit about Children's Advocacy Day, a little bit about advocacy in general, and a little bit about policy priorities. If you have questions at any time, you can use the chat feature, and we'll have some time for questions at the end, but we'll keep track of those questions as we go, and we'll address those during the presentation. Okay, advancing slides here. So why is Children's Advocacy Day so important? And as many of you on this webinar know, when it comes to legislators, numbers matter. There are a lot of competing priorities for the General Assembly and for legislators, and some of those legislators are fairly new, if not brand new. And when legislators see numbers, they see hundreds of advocates that care about kids in the rotunda and coming to meet with them about issues that matter to kids and families in Kentucky, they realize that these issues are important. So one of the really big things about Children's Advocacy Day is just having lots of people there. And while we're there, we are asking our legislators to prioritize kids and their families. And we have one of the largest, possibly the largest turnout of advocacy days in Frankfort. We know that there are enough voices there to make a difference between advocates like you who are there, and then we also have hundreds of youth that attend as well. And between all of that, we know we kind of can be critical mass. So we're going to start with a quick overview of the Children's Advocacy Day agenda, and then move into some of your action items as an advocate. And there are some things that are different about the agenda this year. So I'll talk about those just in case you are used to coming to Children's Advocacy Day. There's just a couple things to mention. So it's a pretty full day. At 9:30, material pickup begins on the Capitol mezzanine. So you can pick up your folders, which has the agenda for the day and has fact sheets for blueprint priorities, a map, a list of legislators, all kinds of stuff is in that folder. And we also have lanyards so that all the legislators will see you walking through the halls as someone who is there who cares about kids. So that starts at 9:30 and will go until 11, but we will also have someone there on the mezzanine throughout the day. So in the past, there's been a resource table in the annex. We'll not be there. We'll just be on the mezzanine all day. And also there is a small rally in the rotunda at 9:30. That is not us. That is not Children's Advocacy Day. So just know if you are getting there around 9:30, there will be a rally. You haven't missed anything. It's not this rally. So also starting at 9:30 and going until 10:30 are the advocacy information stations on the Capitol mezzanine. So we will have 4 stations around the mezzanine, and if you want to learn more about the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children priorities that are moving forward as bills, we will have information about those there. So you can get some tips for meeting with your legislator and also get some talking points for meeting with your legislator. And we expect the mezzanine to be pretty crowded, but you can stop by any one of those stations during that hour. They'll all be the same. And between 9:30 or even earlier, if you get there earlier, until 2, meet with your legislators. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to set up a meeting with your legislator and all of that, but it's really important to schedule your meetings in advance, and you can start doing that now, and especially once they come back to the Capitol next week. So in order to let your legislators know that you want them to make kids a priority, you've got to have those meetings scheduled. Then at 11 o'clock, usually this happens at 10 o'clock, so this is a heads up for folks who have come to Children's Advocacy Day in the past. The rally is at 11 o'clock. So the Rally for Kentucky Kids, which will feature youth speakers, awards for legislators who have gone the extra distance for kids. There will be lots of cheering, so please come ready to cheer. Also, please note that there is very limited seating, and we try and reserve that for folks who absolutely need a seat and cannot stand the entire time. So come early if you need a seat, and if not, be prepared to stand for a minute. As of now, leadership from both chambers and the governor are confirmed to speak, but that is always subject to change. And we also have some youth speakers lined up as well. Between meeting with your legislator and the rally, or maybe after the rally, there are some legislative committee meetings at 10 and 12. So Senate Health and Welfare meets at 10, House Judiciary meets at 12. Both of those are in the legislative annex. These times and room locations are subject to change. So we'll try and have a more updated schedule if we can, in the packet that you'll receive at the information tables. But I believe that that's when they will be. We don't yet know if a blueprint bill will be on the agenda, but we hope that they will be, but those agendas have not been published yet either. But if you've never been to a committee hearing, it's a good experience because before a bill ever makes it to the floor for a vote, it has to go through a committee. You can hear legislator questions and kind of see some of that vetting process, but we encourage you to prioritize legislator meetings over the committee meetings, but they're in the same building anyway, so you can drop in. At 2, you can watch the House or Senate in session. You have to obtain gallery passes in order to do that at the clerk's offices for the House or the Senate to sit in on one of the galleries. And seating in the gallery is first come, first serve, and it can be hard to get a gallery pass. So that should be the first thing that you do that day if you do want to stick around to watch the House or Senate in session. And then all day, we have the Children's Advocacy Day social media station. So this will be on the Capitol mezzanine as well, and you can snap a picture and show your support for Kentucky Kids on social media. You can post on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. There's a few hashtags, we'll show those later, that we'll be encouraging folks to use throughout the day. There will also be a Snapchat filter. I don't actually know what Snapchat is, but I hear that Snapchat is really cool, and we have a filter for that as well. So please stop by that. So a few tips and reminders for the day. The first thing to know is that you want to get there early. I would say by or before 10:30, but you really may want to get there before that, especially because hopefully you have scheduled a meeting with your legislator or will be wanting to learn more about the policy priorities. But there is a parking garage, but it can be a little bit of a walk to get to the door of the Capitol, and there's always a line at the door because they check IDs and search bags and make sure you sign in. And there's just a lot of traffic in the hallway of the annex and the Capitol. You may have heard some buzz about how they were limiting people walking through the tunnel that connects the Capitol building and the legislative annex. It is open now, so everyone can walk between the two buildings. But you cannot congregate in there. So it's good news that traffic is open, but just know that if you were planning to stand there and huddle or something, you just can't do that. So, so that's important. Give yourself lots of time and bring your photo ID. And we want to see lots of photos and social media posts. So have your phone ready and charge your phone. Be sure to eat. There is a cafeteria in the basement of the annex, but it can be kind of crowded on Children's Advocacy Day, so you may want to pack a snack in case there's a wait. And finally, come prepared to be bold. Be bold in cheering at the rally, be bold in connecting with other advocates, be bold in meeting with your legislator and asking them to step up for kids. You know, we all believe that kids and their families are a priority throughout the Commonwealth, and let's make sure that everybody hears that loud and clear. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mara to go over the Advocates Checklist.
All right, thanks, Jessie. Hi, all. I am Mara Powell, and we are going to go over a few reminders to do before Children's Advocacy Day on February 13th. And this really is kind of a Advocacy 101, but we're framing it around Children's Advocacy Day. But these tips really can apply to a number of issues that you care about and can be for any advocate planning to visit the Capitol or contact their legislators. So first, let's look at a few reminders for before the day. It's all about preparation, folks. So first, if you haven't already, be sure to register for CAD, and you can do that at our website. And that will make sure that you receive all of the email updates and reminders that you need. And we also encourage you to step up your social media game, like Jesse was talking about. We have been and will continue to share updates on CAD and on blueprint items that are moving. And these hashtags are ones that we use and other advocates and legislators use. And so being able to follow along with those will get you in on the conversation throughout the session. And of course, you want to know all about the policies, so you can visit the Kentucky Youth Advocate site for fact sheets and on our legislative and administrative priorities. And if you want to check out the status of those bills, you can do so on our bill tracker, which is also on our website. And that is live, and there are several bills that are already filed that are good for kids, including some blueprint items and some other legislative items that we are following. And we'll talk about a few of those shortly. And then a vital piece of information here, if you don't already know yet, and there are some new folks in the House and in the Senate. So if you don't know who represents you in Frankfort, be sure to find that out. And you can find out what committees they serve on as well. And you can do that either on the LRC webpage, or you can use the legislator lookup tool that we have on our website. And I will show you that in just a second. So first you will go to the advocacy page, which you can get to through the advocacy tab on our website, and go to the advocacy toolkit link. And you will see the legislator lookup link there that you see on your screen. You'll be able to type in your address, and when you click submit, it'll come up with your state senator and state representative, their name as well as contact information, their email address, their office address, all of that, so you can contact them throughout the session. And it'll also include, if they have it, their social media accounts, so you can be easily able to click on those and follow them right there, so you can see what they are posting about and how you can interact with them throughout the session. All right, and back over to Jessie.
Okay, so continuing the theme of the Advocates Checklist, this is the Advocates Checklist for what to do on Children's Advocacy Day. So top of the list is show up for kids. The impact of Children's Advocacy Day on legislators is the sheer number of advocates who attend and raise their voice for kids. As we talked about earlier, there's real power in numbers, so be as visible as possible, whether that's in a meeting with your legislator, at the rally, in committee meetings, throughout the halls of the annex or on the Capitol mezzanine, whatever it is, really be visible and positive in your advocacy. Another item for the checklist that day is to be an advocate on social media. You can tweet at your legislator, you can post links to the blueprint fact sheets on Facebook so your friends can read them. You can really embrace that as an advocacy space. We have that social media station, that Snapchat filter, and we encourage you to use that because it's important not only for legislators to see that, but also for your friends and family and colleagues to see that so they know what issues are good for kids and what kinds of changes we can make in Kentucky. And also on that checklist would be to make connections that day on Children's Advocacy Day. So meet other advocates or connect with the advocates that you know so that we can have stronger connections and be stronger allies for kids, not only on Children's Advocacy Day and not only during the legislative session, but throughout the year. So I am going to turn it back over to Mara to talk about meeting with your legislator. To talk about what to do after Children's Advocacy Day.
All right, thanks, Jessie. So, of course, there is going to be a lot of session left after the big event on February 13th. So if you were able to set up a meeting with your legislator or connect with them at the rally or in the halls of Frankfort, be sure to follow up with a thank you note for letting them know that you appreciate that they stepped up for kids. And we find that handwritten notes are best, but you can also drop them an email, so make sure you kind of bookmark their contact information once you figure that out. And then we also will have some other tips on how to coordinate with your, or to contact your legislator, and those resources that we talked about that you can get on Children's Advocacy Day, as well as on the advocacy toolkit that we have on our website. Be sure to follow them on social media, like we said, so that you can follow along with them throughout the session and to track their votes on those blueprint items that we will talk about shortly. And one thing that we suggest is to contact them as those bills move, and we put out action alerts, which you can get through the email listserv if you're signed up for that. We also plan to send those out via text alerts, so if you would like those, you can text KYA-info at 51555, and you will get those alerts as they come out. And then a good way to look at all of this info consolidated on the bills is on our bill tracker, like we mentioned, and we will now turn it over to our policy team here at KYA to be able to talk about the Blueprint for Kentucky's Children and its priorities.
Yeah, so we're going to share an overview of the 2019 Blueprint for Kentucky's Children policy priorities, but just a little bit of background on the Blueprint first, for those of you who don't know. So Blueprint is a coalition of nonprofit, public, and private organizations that speaks with a common voice in order to have a better shot at making positive changes for Kentucky's children. And I know that many of you on this webinar or watching a recording of this webinar are already Blueprint partners. But the Blueprint stands on 3 pillars. Thriving communities launch strong families launch successful kids, and successful kids launch a prosperous future for Kentucky. And with that, we are going to turn it over to some folks who can tell you more about this year's policy priorities. We are going to start with a policy that is a priority for both the House and the Senate, as it is both House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1. So Harper, if you want to kick us off.
Okay, so again, I'm Harper Kelly, and I am the Education Policy Director. I also work with youth engagement here at Kentucky Youth Advocates. The idea that assigning number 1 to a bill typically marks that bill as the most important one for that particular chamber. So the fact that it is 1 for both the House and the Senate is particularly important for everyone to realize. It is actually going through the Senate, and so it is going to be called from this point on Senate Bill 1. It not only highlights that it is a highly supported bicamerally bill, but it's also being upheld as the bill that the minority party is supporting as well. So it's a true model for that bipartisan and bicameral collaboration in this political environment that's been so polarized around other topics. So the bill came about, I'll just give you a little background on it. After the Marshall County and Frederick Douglass shootings, we know that most states, including Kentucky, were feeling pressure to make schools safer and to make quick decisions and so some of them latched on to quick reactive solutions like arming teachers or buying metal detectors without stepping back and looking at the big picture of why these things are happening in schools. So Kentucky's legislature, there was a bill where they were discussing this last spring, but they decided not to make a quick decision. They decided to step back, created a school safety working group that would be made up of bipartisan legislators and stakeholders and other experts in school safety. They began meeting in June of 2018 and convened or finalized. Their last meeting was in December. Co-chairs Senator Max Wise and Representative Bam Carney approached these meetings through an extremely intentional process. They wanted to hear what was currently happening in the school districts, what is supported by real research and evidence before they made any proposed recommendations, and Senate Bill 1 is the result of that very comprehensive look. Kentucky and our partners, KYA and our partners, have asked that a priority be placed on primary prevention components, such as increased school-based mental health services and trauma-informed schools. And we're excited to say that Senate Bill 1 has included almost all of those suggestions that we made. I'll share with you some of those highlights. It's a 32-page bill, and many of the sections are brand new to what is in current statute. One of the highlights is that they are asking for one mental health professional per 1,500 students. We are currently advocating for a lower ratio for that. We believe that is a pretty high ratio. So we'd like to have that lowered if at all possible. Additional highlights are that all public schools will adopt a trauma-informed approach to education. That is a will, not a may. Encouraging external law enforcement to communicate to schools when a student was involved in trauma outside of the school setting, so that the schools can be prepared when the student comes to school that day, understanding that something may have occurred that morning or that evening or the weekend before. Increasing school resource officer training from 40 hours, which is what they would receive right now, which is actually not mandated, but to currently what they're suggesting is an additional 80 hours, so it would be 120 hours over 3 years. And they even included in this bill what, quote, specialized training would need to include, which is resource officers as teachers and mentors, youth mental health awareness, diversity, trauma-informed responses, understanding children with special needs, connecting to resources. So we were extremely excited to see that those things were specifically mentioned as important to add to the curricula of what school resource officers will learn in order to become based at a school and working with children. Research-based protections would control, they also highlighted in the bill these protections that would control access to school buildings to make the schools secure, such as having doors that lock from the outside, having locking doors, cameras and intercom systems at the main entrance. Those are just some examples and of how to keep the building safe. They've also put in there an accountability built in for schools that don't meet security standards. There's also accountability for SROs, or school resource officers, who do not complete the training. Each school will also be developing a trauma team that would identify and assist students who have been impacted by trauma, trying to get that response at an earlier level than before they may have a negative response or outcry. So we do have some minor recommendations to the current language, but overall, we are extremely pleased with Senate Bill 1. Now we'll move to Mahek, who is going to share with us about some health bills.
Thank you, Harper. Hi, everyone. I'm Mahek Kalra with Kentucky Youth Advocates. I'll be discussing our health priority, blueprint priority, which is to help kids grow up in healthy school environments by enacting a statewide tobacco-free campus policy. We believe that health impacts every aspect of a child's life and is one of the most important components of overall child well-being. And healthy school environments help kids grow better prepared for the future and for their future. And by enacting a statewide comprehensive tobacco-free campus policy, which includes the use of e-cigarettes, vapes, smokeless tobacco on school property, this would prevent students from starting to use those products and protect children and teens from the harms of secondhand tobacco and e-cigarette exposure. Kentucky kids will grow up healthier working with adults when we prioritize their health. in schools today, which is why we're a strong champion or advocate for this bill. And so what we know with tobacco-free policies, a healthy school campus really reinforces the message that tobacco and e-cigarettes are harmful. Currently, only 42% of Kentucky public school districts have adopted tobacco-free policies to protect students, faculty, staff, and visitors. And we believe all students and student athletes deserve a school campus that prioritizes their health and their safety. We also believe this policy will help curb the explosion of e-cig use among teens. We know that nicotine is highly addictive, and in adolescents in particular, they're a vulnerable population to its effect. E-cigarettes like Juuls are actually contain high levels of nicotine that can cause a lasting damage to adolescent brain development, among other negative health outcomes. We're excited to share that there is a bill that is filed in the House and Senate. In the House side, it is House Bill 11, filed by Representative Mosier, who's the chair of the Health and Family Services Committee, and the Senate by Senator Alvarado, who's the chair of Health and Welfare there. So we're excited about this priority moving forward, and we look forward to all of you all supporting this policy. So now I'm going to turn it over to Courtney.
All right, thanks, Mehek. My name is Courtney Downs, and I'll be talking about the justice items. So we have 3 youth justice items that are on the blueprint that are pretty closely related, so I'll talk about them all together. Overall, the blueprint is working on a more effective response to children who get in trouble so that we can build safer communities and stronger kids. And one of those priorities relates to how we respond when young children get into trouble. So we're talking about taking a trauma-informed approach, accessing community-based resources, and including the family in the process to encourage sustainability instead of taking young children to court or placing them in detention. Another priority relates to how we respond to youth who commit what are known as status offenses, which are acts that are only deemed criminal because of the individual's age. What's often overlooked is that status offenses like running away and skipping school are some of the most common reactions to trauma, and criminalizing these behaviors doesn't address the cause of the problem. So Senator Westerfield, he's filed Senate Bill 20, which will directly address the juvenile justice system in Kentucky and some of these issues as well. This is an 82-page bill, so I can't cover everything right now, but some of what it would do is address any disproportionate minority contact with the juvenile justice system and disparities in discipline and educational settings. It would require anyone under contract with the Department of Juvenile Justice to report data on all youth in custody every year. And it would also establish rules related to how individuals with mental illness, developmental immaturity, and intellectual disability are treated in court. And it would expand diversion options for youth whose cases have been adjudicated. And then the other issue, we also want to minimize the impact of parental incarceration on children. And when we talk about incarceration, we need to include short-term detention. Being in jail for even just a few days or weeks can have a significant impact on a family with job loss, the child having to switch homes or even being placed in foster care. And for too many parents, this happens because they cannot afford to pay the bail. So limiting the use of money bail, making decisions about jail time prior to any trial, and then basing that decision on public safety risk can go a long way to ensuring fewer children are negatively impacted by parental incarceration. And with House Bill 94 having been filed, advocates and legislators are working together and hoping to make that a reality. So now I will hand it over to Shannon.
Hi all, this is Shannon Moody, obviously with Kentucky Youth Advocates as well, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the child welfare priority areas on the blueprint. So the first one is around protecting children and strengthening families by aligning current state law in Kentucky with the recent federal Family First Prevention Services Act. And that act passed in February of 2018. And what it does is it realigns federal funding to prioritize prevention and evidence-based strategies in order for children to stay in the home whenever possible. Right now, there are 2 bills that are filed that are related to Family First. One is House Bill 158 that is sponsored by Representative Meade. And there are a couple of things that does, but the core of that is it aligns the background checks components that are required of the new federal legislation, and then also includes a foster youth bill of rights, which is a really great step in the right direction. The other one is Senate Bill 31, and that is sponsored by Senator Alvarado, and that one helps us to get in line with the new regulations around sibling visitation. So those are the two bills to keep an eye out for. There may be some additional ones that are filed around Family First, but those are the two major ones that we're aware of to keep track of. The other issue that we would like to talk a little bit about is ensuring the safety of school-age children by not allowing a school enrollment change during abuse or neglect. We're looking into options right now to ensure that if a child is suspected to have been abused or neglected, they can't be removed from their school environment, to ensure that there are adult eyes remaining on the child. So this may be done through a statute change, but we're also looking into potential changes within regulation to address this issue instead. But really, we just want to make sure that kids who are suspected of being abused are having regular adult contact with adults who know them and kind of know what the status is of them. So with that, I think we are opening it up for questions.
Yeah, so we are taking questions now about either the policy priorities you heard about, the bills related to them, or Children's Advocacy Day in general. And just to add that, as we mentioned before, the bill tracker on our website already has some of the bills you heard about today. It will have even more of them, especially once the legislators come back into session next week. We'll start to see even more of them pop up on the bill tracker, so just stay tuned to that. So are there any questions about Children's Advocacy Day, the policies, how to prepare? I would also encourage any of you who have been to Children's Advocacy Day before and want to share with the others on this webinar, like some of your best moments or tips to either meet with legislator or just tips for the day. I would encourage you to do that as well. Oh, yes, and you do have to type it into the chat window. Thanks for that reminder. We don't have a way to unmute individuals. Oh, I am seeing in the chat window lots of folks saying that it's really cold there. So that is good to know that that is not, or I guess bad to know that that is not an isolated issue in any part of Kentucky today, that was universal. Okay, so it looks like we're not getting questions, which is fine. You all are welcome to reach out via email if you would like after this. And we'll also continue to have updates come out via social media, via email if you have registered for Children's Advocacy Day. So like we talked about, like that text alerts line and all of that stuff. So that's all going to come out, yeah, again, on social media and on email. So just stay tuned for that. And if you're not, for some reason, already on our listserv, please do sign up for our listserv to receive the action alerts and just kind of our weekly updates on bills and things like that. And one reminder.
There seems like there are some questions.
Oh. Okay, we're not seeing those. Hold on. Okay. Hold on, everyone. We're getting over to where we can see questions.
Okay.
Listen, okay, folks are saying they're excited to come to their first Children's Advocacy Day. We are so glad to have you. Thank you. How do we get a legislator to respond? All right, I'm going to toss that to some policy folks.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the issue is, but we find typically one of the most effective ways to get a legislator to respond is, one, to be their constituent. If you live in their district, they are more likely to be open to what you have to say. Another a good strategy to attempt to get a response is try to meet in person, or also the next option is a phone call. But it really depends on a legislator's personal preference. Some are really responsive on email, but making sure that you are developing a relationship with the legislator in the interim as well, so not during session, because they are so busy during the legislative session. It's really important to try to make those connections and build those relationships before session starts. But also just persistence. Don't give up.
That's true. Okay, we had a question about that was a really good question, by the way. Thank you for that. Will the PowerPoint be available after the webinar? Yeah, we can send that out, and a recording of this will also be available. So we'll put this on our YouTube page, so if you want to share that with anyone who wasn't able to join the webinar, you can share copies of the slides and this webinar as well. So, okay, this question, when do they start handing out the tickets or the passes to see the Senate? I believe they do that day, right?
Well, so, yeah, typically you need to ask ahead of time, and a lot of times people go through their representative or senator to get that. So that would be one suggestion for you, would be to reach out and do that. Mm-hmm. We typically try to get whatever remaining tickets are available, but we typically don't know how many those would be until literally that day for some of the groups of youth who are coming. And so we'll take those tickets and hand those out to groups of youth. Now, last year, there was snow day for probably 80% of our state. For Children's Advocacy Day, and so we had quite a few gallery passes available that we couldn't give to you.
But typically those originate from their legislature.
Yeah, but typically, yeah, I said that. Yeah, typically they go through. You would go through your legislator to try to get those.
And you can also, if you go that day, you go to the clerk's office, but in advance, it sounds like you want to talk to your legislator.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Great question.
So there's a question around Family First. The question is there any bill out there to help the families to receive the stipend that foster parents receive? That's a great question because we have a lot of families in Kentucky. I assume that this is about kinship care, but we have a lot of families in Kentucky or close family friends who are raising children who have stepped up to do that to keep their kids out of foster care. So as of right now, there's no bill filed that would require the cabinet to pay the stipend that foster parents receive. But there are currently two bills related to a monetary stipend for kinship families. Those bills are filed in both the Senate and the House. One of them is filed from Senator Tarrant. And that one is Senate Bill 53, Senator Reggie Thomas and Senator Parrott, and that's Senate Bill 53. And then also House Bill 68 by Representative Fugate is another related kinship care stipend bill. But do remember that this year it is a short session and it is not a budget session. So typically any bills that have any kind of like fiscal note or that could potentially cost money do not typically go through, and they don't generally open the budget on non-budget years. That is a great question. I will say that the cabinet is working on putting out a service array in the spring of 2019, and you can learn more about that as we learn more about that on KYA's website.
And that's
great question.
That's definitely an issue that we are going to keep watching, between now and the 2020 session. So if that is still something we need to work on during the 2020 session, we will be there on that. So yes, great question. We had another question about does everyone register through Kentucky Youth Advocates? If you want to register for Children's Advocacy Day, that we are kind of the keepers of that registration. It's on our website. You don't have to register in order to show up for Children's Advocacy Day. That's really just so you receive email alerts about what's happening and to make sure that we have enough materials for everybody. And when it comes to things like making legislator appointments, or if you want to talk to your legislator in advance about getting passes, stuff like that, that's actually stuff that you have to do on your own. We can't help with that. They would much rather hear from you than hear from us when it comes to things like that. So a question around, should we bring, like handouts and cards and stuff like that to visits? I would say absolutely yes. So if you already have those because of some advocacy work that you were doing, I would say bring those. When you come to Children's Advocacy Day, we have fact sheets around these policy priorities. Those will be in your packet. They will be at the advocacy information stations. You can give those to legislators. We'll also have little notes in your folder called Step Up for Kids notes. So let's say you go by your legislator's office, but they weren't there to actually have a meeting. There's like a note that you can leave that says, hey, I would really like for you to support whatever bill this is that you want to know about. So that's something else to think about. So yes, okay. And then there's a question here, is there a time we would all want to, or it's, oh, okay, sorry, going back up. Oh, okay. So do you advise visiting legislators as a group? I'm gonna toss that. Yeah, like it's a good idea, but if somebody else wants to answer this more, Katie, please, if I can.
So I would say the short answer is yes, but. So having a small group, like 2 to 3, sometimes like max 5, of people who are all from that district, that legislator's district, to go meet them together can be a really efficient way to talk about one specific issue that you all are passionate about or want your legislator to learn more about. If it's more than that, I would recommend splitting up into more groups. So because the room is small, but also if you have people who want to ensure that they get to say their piece, you only have 15 minutes. So sometimes you need to split up into to accomplish that.
Yeah, also, if you do have a larger group, though, I think by telling them that as you're setting it up, because sometimes they can reserve a different room so that you can all fit into that room. So I would definitely not suggest showing up with 15 people when one person has set up a meeting and they're expecting one person.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and if you have a group that has, if you happen to be from kind of a diverse geography, or at least kind of diverse geography, and can meet with several representatives or several senators or something like that, it's always good to have lots of folks hearing that message as well. So to increase the number of folks who are kind of buying into that. So, okay. So, we had a comment from Anne saying that this is our first Children's Advocacy Day. So we are so excited that you are coming, and it sounds like you are already doing that, that Shannon was talking about in terms of making connections with your House representative and your senator in advance. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for coming to Children's Advocacy Day. And then a question around if there's a time to meet before it all starts. Definitely show up if your group wants to all arrive together. That is a good thing. This brings up something else, that it will be sort of busy on the mezzanine, and it will sort of be busy on the Capitol floor in the rotunda. So just a heads up, if you are coming with a group, to make sure that you kind of have some contingency plans on where to meet, because there may not, there's maybe a lot of people or something like that. So, yeah. Any other questions from folks? These were great questions. Any others? Okay, So like we were saying before, we are available for questions either around policies or around advocacy after this. You're welcome to email us or call us. If you heard some stuff and you're kind of like, oh, can we talk through some more details? We can connect and talk through those. And we'll send out the recording of the webinar, and we will also send out a copy of the slides so you can see those as well. And you can see all of this information also on our website, or most of this information also on our website. Oh, we've got a couple last-minute questions. So heard we might be limited in where we can go. That is not an issue anymore. It was during the first week of session. They have now opened the tunnel. It wasn't so much you were limited in where you can go, but you were limited in being able to move in both directions in the tunnel that connects the Legislative Annex and the Capitol. That is fine now. So you can go from both the Annex to the Capitol and the Capitol to the Annex. All that's fine. You just cannot congregate in there. So that's okay. And is the Capitol handicap accessible? It is. Within the Capitol itself, there are elevators, and then if you are going from the Capitol to the Legislative Annex, there is that tunnel that we've been talking about, and there is a chairlift. There's a few steps in the tunnel, so there's a chairlift within that, but yes, there are elevators throughout the building and the chairlift. Great question. Okay. All right, I think that's it. And again, feel free to contact us if you have any questions. Thank you all so much. We're so excited to see all of you on February 13th.